Hi everyone, I am Denizhan, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can use the dynamic input system in your project. Dynamic input system is an extension of enhanced input system by Epic. With this plugin you will be able to add or remove multiple input mapping context based on the provided data assets that you can add or remove from your character or any possessed pawn. As you can see here, I have a character here. And I want to enable the debug view for this plugin. First, I have to type dynamic input.enable debug mode 1 to enable this. And I can get the pawn name. I can get the dynamic input component for that actor. And I can see that I have applied 3 input mapping context and 1 data assets. Currently applied input mapping contexts are IMC character movement, IMC generic ability input mapping, IMC gameplay cameras. And these input mapping contexts are applied from one dataset, which is called DIMC base character inputs. And whenever I draw my swords, I apply another dataset for this component, and this dataset will apply another input mapping context to my pawn, which is IMC melee combat. With this melee combat, I can now access to my input mapping such as dodge or swing my swords, or I can now able to block, etc. Yes, this is completely game dependent, but you can add or remove input mapping context very easily. For example, in your game, if you get in a vehicle, for example, you can have different input mappings for that vehicle and add or remove input mapping context dynamically using just several methods that I will show later. To use this plugin, first we have to enable it. Go to your Edit, Plugins, and type Dynamic Input System and enable it. After you have enabled it, you have to restart the editor to use this. And after you have added the plugin, go to your character or any pawn you desire, and in the components, we can add this component called Dynamic Input. And in the details, if you have clicked your Dynamic Input component, you will see that you will have only one variable here. This variable is called Input Mapping Data Assets, which is an array that consists of data assets that will add input mapping context whenever this pawn gets possessed. By default, we have to use this add mapping context function in enhanced input local player subsystem to add input mapping context with some priority and options. Adding input mapping context can be challenging if you want to add our input mappings dynamically and aware of the game's context, because this operation is client only, and we generally want to add our input mapping context whenever a pawn gets possessed or unpossessed. But this event possess is server only, so managing this can be difficult and dirty our graph, blueprint graph. This plugin solves that and adds our input mapping context whenever a pawn gets possessed and removes the added input mapping context from our player controller whenever we unpossess that pawn. And for the games that we have to change our pawns dynamically at runtime, managing this input mapping context can be challenging too. And that problem is solved too by this plugin, because we ready our input mapping context that will be enabled whenever this pawn gets possessed by using add, remove, clear dynamic input data assets. And whenever we possess a pawn, this input mapping context will be enabled in the controller whenever we possess that pawn. Let's imagine a gameplay scenario where a pawn is controlling a vehicle and that pawn is controlled by an AI controller. And let's say that our player controller wants to possess that pawn. In that case, we need to have already defined input mappings for that pawn, so that whenever we possess it, we have that input mapping context beforehand. This plugin will allow you to achieve that gameplay scenario. A similar scenario is achieved by using this plugin in my game. So let's say that I have a character that has a sword in its hand, and this character is controlled by an AI controller, and our player controller wants to possess that pawn. We have to some input mapping context that will already be there, and whenever we possess that pawn, I can attack with that sword and dodge, etc. All the input mappings will be there, and whenever we possess that pawn, we can use them. If you are using this plugin, these are the functions that mainly going to be used. These are called add, remove, clear dynamic input data assets, which takes in a dynamic input data asset like this, and we can clear, remove, and add our dynamic assets like this, and we can also check if we can apply a data set which with some conditions. If these are checked, this returns true, if not false. And we can also get the currently applied input context. These are the default input mapping context object references. So how do you define these data assets? First, go to your content browser and type in data asset, and this can be also be navigated by going to miscellaneous. I can't pronounce that word, sorry. And go to data assets and type in dynamic input component data. And as you can see here, we have conditions, input mapping context, priority, as in this one. This priority and options are coming from here, and if you want to learn more about them, you can go to the enhanced input section in the documentation of Unreal Engine and learn more about them. So basically you want to define these data assets, so whenever a state gets changed for your pawn, these input mappings are applied. These states could vary depending on your game, but let's give some examples. For example, combat may need some different input mapping contexts, or getting on a vehicle, or it can be simple things like getting on a ladder. By modularizing your inputs, you can create or define your abilities much more easily and use the enhanced input system in much more depth. So let's go back to our data set. In addition conditions, we can create multiple conditions. By default, there is no condition here. This may change in the further versions, but you can create your own conditions just by creating a new blueprint and type dynamic input mapping adding condition and create your blueprints like this. So in this blueprint, which is just a regular blueprint by the way, we have an overridable function called should add input mapping context, and in here we are seeing that we have a boolean. If this boolean gets checked, meaning this dataset can now add it to that pawn. If not, it won't be added to the pawn. We may have more inputs in the further versions, but we can check the operator system or anything world related, and we can use variables that can be customizable per instance. So let's say that we have some integers, we have some names, etc., and these variables are now usable in our condition. So we can check anything here. And actually this is it for this plugin. I know it's a simple plugin, but it lets you clean up your Palm blueprints very easily because you define your actions in data view, which is much more cleaner, I think. This is the main reason I have developed it. I hope you find some use cases. I will show you how I use it in my project. Warning, this is not related to the plugin, this is just a showcase. So in my character I have a component called inventory system component, and in the details I have two U objects that has one function, and one of these adds or removes my input mapping context dynamically. So let's open up that. So in that inventory updated all execution, we have an event called onSub inventory updated, and this event gets called whenever an inventory gets updated on that component, and if that system is tagged with item.equipment armament, meaning that system can carry weapons, this function or this event gets called, and in this event we evaluate a chooser, and this chooser selects a dataset which defines equipment information. And let's say that we have no item on our left hand, but we have an item that is tagged with one-handed. In that case, we choose this dataset that is called equip set one-handed sword, and we have some data in that dataset. One of this is called add dynamic IMC, which carries this dataset that is called DIMC melee combat, and this carries this input mapping context called melee combat. So whenever we are equipped with one-handed item, we add this input mapping context to our character. And that's it for this plugin. If you want to learn more or stay updated, you can go to the documentation page. The link will be down below. And yeah, if you have any questions or any suggestions, please share them. See you next time.